Can you suggest for us some self-care strategies, preventative maintenance, if you like, for sustaining or nurturing our own mental health during this difficult period?
Yeah, so some research has already come out actually from surveys of people in Canada about sort of getting through COVID, and the number one strategies are getting outside into nature and sort of engaging in exercise. You know, that one start there to whatever extent you can. I know you guys are based in Alberta. My family's from Edmonton. That can be very challenging in the winter months when it's very cold and the days are very short. But finding sort of even small opportunities to take a short walk to get some fresh air and things like that can be really helpful. The second one I would suggest is finding ways to build back in the social connections and supports, even if they're in some sort of modified format. You know, I had a birthday this year and had a connection with friends over Zoom, and certainly it wasn't as good as it would have been, you know, had it been in person, but still created this sense of like, oh, there's something to celebrate and there's some positivity. And so I think finding ways to have those is very helpful. And then the third one I would say is a little bit more of a thinking-based strategy, but it's sort of taking a look at what's in your life and the things that are going on and recognizing what is outside of your control, what is really not going to be something that you can fix or totally own or manage, whether it's your emotions or the pandemic itself or the ways in which it's changed your teaching environment. And in accepting those things, then sort of shift to whatever extent you can to say, okay, if this is the way that it's going to be, how do I try to make the most out of this thing? How do I find any sources of joy within my teaching, knowing that my main source of joy in these sort of large performances or festivals is gone? You know, if I am experiencing anxiety at much higher levels, how do I commit to doing something that helps me get through that versus sort of just trying to make the anxiety go away? So I'll stop there.
Great. Anything to add, Dr. Stewart?
Yeah, yeah, those are excellent points. I think other things to add, I guess when I think about it is, you know, when I went through medical training or whatever, you know, you get taught like first aid. So it's like, you know, ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation. And I think we need to kind of go back to that level now in terms of caring for ourselves, like back to basics. So in addition to being outside, and there was research showing that time spent outdoors, just that, you know, and exercising, and even moderate to high level exercise is even better than low levels. But beyond that, the other things are sleeping. So trying, even though your schedule might be changed or you could work off hours or that kind of thing, trying to keep some regularity in your life, not rigidly, but keeping sort of a usual schedule, not letting yourself stay up to 3 a.m. So looking after first things first, as my grandfather used to tell me, first things first. So, you know, sleep and nutrition. So there's a study in China looking at predictors of people who did better in terms of mental health impact. So just keeping with, you know, good nutrition, sleeping, eating, exercising, taking a few moments for yourself, and just making sure that you're not forgetting those basics, because, you know, these are unusual times. Everything feels up in the air. The normalcy that usually we rely on sort of to provide a skeleton or structure in our life has been all shifted up. So just taking some and making time and paying attention to the fact that you are looking after those ABCs.
I wanted to comment briefly on one of your other points, which is sort of this hyper-productivity. And I can imagine for band teachers, especially who are really passionate about the job and are looking to, like you sort of said, maintain their program through this or try to be the best teachers that they can. Another way anxiety might manifest is really just putting tons and tons of energy and time into trying to make class as effective as possible and keep their teaching at the level that it's been when they've been able to do it in person. But then the question becomes of sort of, where do those ABCs that Dr. Stewart mentioned fit into that? And if you're reaching for expectations that maybe just aren't feasible, especially if they're not feasible at, you know, with maintaining your self-care, then that becomes that question. So maybe letting go a little bit of, okay, this isn't going to be my best teaching year, with the idea that, I'll be a more effective teacher if I'm healthy and able to cope with stress, and at least I'll be able to support my students and things like that. So some of those shifts might be helpful. Yeah.
If I could add one more point to that. The other problem, so you might be overproductive or working harder, but one of the structural things that's been taken away is vacation. So people may just have a pattern in life where working hard, but then there's that traditional family trip to a cottage or to wherever it might be that you might go, and that's sort of been taken away from us now. So working harder, loss of that structure, and then not having that restorative thing. So I think trying to, even if you are stuck at home, to create some space and time where you do maybe vacation-like things would be a good idea.
Yeah. For people who've not had mental health issues in the past, but who may be struggling now, should we expect a return to normal after the pandemic, or are these mental health issues likely to linger? I mean, I even think there are probably people who sense, I think I'm feeling some excess stress or anxiety, but I'm just going to hang on till this is over and then I'll be fine. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think anyone really knows. This is one of the uncertain things, is how people are going to do when we return to the new normal, whatever that is. And we're actually, if I could just put in a little pitch right now, we're doing a study looking at mental health impacts of COVID, and we're intentionally asking people to continue completing the survey over time, so that we can understand how does that play out. But I certainly think the notion of like trying to hold your breath until it's over, or white knuckling until it's done, is probably not the best approach. You can only hold your breath for so long. And I think reaching out, trying to work on some of improving your coping strategies and so on and so forth would be really beneficial. And for anyone who's interested in doing our survey,
please give us a link. Yeah,
really we'd appreciate it.
I would say that it's likely to go both directions, and it'll be a little bit individual. I think if people are finding that primarily their stress and anxiety is related specifically to factors related to the COVID pandemic, and they're sort of, they're more distressed, they're having a hard time, but they're managing to get through it. We do know that when people are removed from highly stressful situations, that they find their way back to, past patterns and health. So I do think that for a lot of people coming out of this, you start the next school year, you're back in your class with your students again. Okay, maybe your program's not quite as robust as it was, but you're excited now about the idea of building it back up. And I think a lot of that will help people return to normal. Where the risk becomes of things staying on is when the patterns and the coping patterns around this anxiety and stress become really problematic, whether it's turning to substance use or isolation or other things. And if those generalize to other sources of stress and anxiety. So you're starting to find it's not just the COVID pandemic that you're worried about anymore. Now it's everything that's going on with your family or things going on in the world. You're watching so much media, like Judith talked about COVID, but now you're keeping it on and you're starting to get worried about global events and things like that. That's where we might see sort of these patterns continue after the pandemic.
Do you have any final words of advice for our teachers in the trenches, or, is there anything that's important to say that you don't feel my questions have given you the opportunity to say at this point?
I would just say thank you for what you're doing and for the service you're providing at this unprecedented time, and it's really meaningful. So I personally have kids, and I'm so grateful to teachers who continue to invest in my kids, in the kids of our society. Hang in there. Don't forget to breathe. Don't forget the ABCs.
Yeah, I would echo that, and you can see a guitar on my wall. Band teachers have been an important influence in my life. And so I think that would be one other thing, is to sort of recognize, that even if you're stressed or you're struggling, that you still can share positive things, that you can still be a positive influence even in a small way, just sort of by being present and sticking with it, and trying to share your expertise or enthusiasm in some way. And the other thing that comes to mind is just, we've talked about this a lot, but recognizing that the emotions you're experiencing, given all of these factors, are normal, that your body is responding to threats, it's trying to keep you safe. And sort of once you recognize, okay, I'm experiencing anxiety, and anxiety itself can't hurt me. Anxiety itself is just a collection of physical sensations. That can then help you try to work through that, versus an approach or a response that might say, I'm so anxious, I have to get rid of this anxiety. I can't stand this. It's going to make me crazy, or things like that. That can really drive people towards sort of those escape patterns as well.
Well, we've really come to the end of our time here, and I just want to say heartfelt thanks to all of you for being willing to share your time today and your expertise with us. I think it's going to be some very valuable information for our band directors who are in the trenches. And I just want to wish you well, as I'm sure you're all very busy at this particular time. And thank you for the good work that you're doing in your own communities.